Hello and welcome to this online lesson. I am Mr. Hoven, and today we are going to be talking about the early years of President Andrew Jackson's presidency. That's right. Last time we were together, we talked about President James Monroe and the Monroe Doctrine, as well as sectionalism. That idea of being more loyal to your section or state rather than the country as a whole. And under President Andrew Jackson, sectionalism again became to strengthen itself under the splitting union of this country. So let's go ahead and get started. Now, before we jump right into Jackson's presidency, I want to take a minute to talk about the election of 1824. This was the election before Jackson became president, and the winner of this election was John Quincy Adams. Now, initially, there was no clear winner that emerged from the election of 1824. Jackson had won the popular vote, but no candidate won a majority. There were 4 candidates, no candidate won the majority of electoral college votes. As a result, the House of Representatives had to choose the president from among the top 3 candidates. Because he finished 4th, Henry Clay was out of the running. As Speaker of the House, though, he was able to influence the results. He urged members of the House to vote for Adams, and after Adams became president, he then named Clay as his Secretary of State. Jackson and his supporters were furious. They accused Adams and Clay of making a corrupt bargain and stealing the election from Jackson. Now, throughout this time that Adams was president, he was not a very popular president. And when the time came for the election of 1829, there was a much different tone in the nation and a need for change. And the nation saw that need coming in the form of Andrew Jackson. Now, President Jackson was a self-made man. Like many who admired him, Jackson was born in a log cabin on the frontier. His parents were immigrants from Ireland. They came to the Carolinas, but by age 15, they had both passed away, so he had to grow up very quickly. He was a very determined young man and wanted to show his toughness at any point. So at age 13, he joined the Patriots during the American Revolution. He was captured by the British, and when a British officer ordered the young prisoner to clean his boots, Jackson refused. The officer took a sword and slashed his hand and his face, and the memory of that attack stayed with Jackson for the rest of his life. After the Revolution, he studied law in North Carolina, and later he moved to Tennessee and set up a successful law practice. He became very wealthy by buying and selling land in Georgia, and he was elected to Congress when he was only in his 20s. He was also seen as a man who was hated but loved by many people. Andrew Jackson was a complex person. He had led a violent and adventurous life. He was quick to lose his temper, and he dealt with his enemies harshly. When he became president, his opponents sarcastically called him King Andrew. Jackson intended to be a strong president by expanding the powers of the presidency. At the same time, his supporters admired his ability to inspire and lead others. They considered him a man of his word and a champion of the common people. To the Creek Native Americans, however, Jackson was an enemy who showed no mercy. After defeating them during the War of 1812, Jackson threatened to kill their leaders if they did not give up lands guaranteed to them by earlier treaties. As a result, the Creeks had no affection for Jackson, and their name for him was Sharp Knife. And we cannot forget that Andrew Jackson was a war hero. He won national fame for his achievements during the War of 1812. He led American forces to a major victory over the British at the Battle of New Orleans. He also defeated the Creek natives and forced them to give up vast amounts of land in Georgia and Alabama. Remember, he was the one that set up trenches outside of New Orleans and had his sharpshooters pick off British soldiers. The British soldiers in that battle lost close to 2,000, and his soldiers only suffered 7 casualties. So taking a look at his pedigree, it was obvious that Jackson was a very strong candidate for president in 1829. He won the election very easily. His supporters cheered the outcome as a victory for the common people. For the first time, the politics of the common people were important. And by the common people, they meant farmers in the West and the South and city workers in the East. His election in 1829 reflected the growing spirit of democracy. The spread of political power to more people was part of what became known as Jacksonian democracy. I'm going to repeat that one more time. Spreading political power to more people, so giving more individual people power in the government, was known as Jacksonian democracy. He was the first Westerner to occupy the White House. His election represented the beginning of a shift of political power to the West. And as President Jackson had campaigned for the presidency. He knew that people expected reform. He said there was a cry for reform from Maine to Louisiana. So after taking office, Jackson fired many government employees. He replaced them with his own supporters. Most other presidents had done the same, but Jackson did it on a larger scale. He dismissed more than 200 previous presidential appointees. Critics accused Jackson of rewarding Democrats who had helped elect him instead of choosing qualified men. So he was essentially replacing people that were pretty much well qualified for the jobs with his buddies, who may or may not have had any experience with the government or politics. According to Jackson, this would prevent a small group of wealthy men from controlling the government. He felt that the ordinary Americans could still fill government jobs. And a Jackson supporter explained another way. To the victor belong the spoils, he declared. Spoils are profits or benefits. So the idea of rewarding your supporters with government jobs became known as the spoils system. But however, Jackson knew that a number of supporters weren't qualified to give him advice. So he only really had a few. So as a result, he seldom met with those officials, and he relied on a group of unofficial advisors, which included Democratic leaders and newspaper editors. These men had a good sense of the nation's mood, and because Jackson met with them in the White House kitchen, the group became known as his kitchen cabinet. Well, that about wraps things up for today. Next time, we'll be looking at the bank war under President Jackson. We'll also take a quick look at his veto and some of the political party shifts that were beginning at that time. We'll see you next time.